My father looked me in the eyes, raised his glass, smiled, and said 6 words that shattered everything I believed about my life. "You're no longer family." The room fell silent. My birthday cake sat untouched. The candles were still burning. No one looked surprised, not my brother, not my stepmother, not even the attorney sitting quietly at the end of the table. I was the only person who hadn't realized my birthday dinner wasn't a celebration. It was an execution, not with violence. With betrayal. 35 years. That's how long I spent believing I belonged in that family. 35 birthdays, 35 Christmas mornings, 35 years of trying to earn a father's love that disappeared without warning, or so I thought, because just as I stood up to leave, the attorney quietly said, "Mr. Reynolds, there's still the second envelope." Every face in the room changed. My father's confidence vanished. My stepmother turned pale. My brother looked like he'd seen a ghost. The attorney slowly reached into his briefcase and pulled out a faded envelope sealed more than 2 decades earlier. Across the front, written in my late mother's unmistakable handwriting, were 8 words that stopped my heart. "For Sophia," when she finally learns the truth. That single envelope unraveled a secret buried for 24 years. A hidden box beneath the floor of an abandoned lake cabin. A voice from beyond the grave. A man I had never met, who turned out to be my biological father. Anonymous letters, forged photographs, a family destroyed by lies, and a betrayal so carefully planned that the people behind it believed the truth would never see daylight. They were wrong, because lies can survive for years, sometimes even decades. But the truth is patient. It waits quietly, until one person finds the courage to open the second envelope. Welcome back to Inspired Real Events, where ordinary people meet impossible family and the quiet ones learn the loudest lessons. If betrayal, gratitude, and slow burn justice are your thing, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe. My name is Sophia Reynolds. What happened to me sounds unbelievable. Sometimes I still wish it weren't true, but every word you're about to hear changed my life forever. This is how my father disowned me, and how my mother's final secret brought our family to its knees. Until 6 months ago, I believed I had a normal family. Not perfect, not close, but still. Family. I believed my father loved me. I believed my older brother, Ethan, simply needed time to grow up. I believed my stepmother's cold smiles were just her personality. I believed that one day everything would finally make sense. I couldn't have been more wrong, because on one ordinary Friday afternoon, my father looked me straight in the eyes, smiled, and calmly said 6 words that shattered everything I'd spent my entire life believing. "You're no longer part of this family." The room became so quiet that I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Nobody moved. Nobody protested. Nobody looked surprised, as if they'd rehearsed that exact moment, as if I was the only person who didn't know today's dinner had been planned as my execution, not with weapons, with betrayal. I thought losing my family would become the worst day of my life. I had no idea. The lawyer sitting silently beside my father hadn't even opened the second envelope yet. And when he finally did, every person in that room stopped breathing. Chapter 1, the birthday that was never about me. People always say your 35th birthday is just another birthday. Mine became the day my entire identity collapsed. The invitation arrived exactly 2 weeks before my birthday. A cream-colored envelope. Handwritten, elegant, old-fashioned, my father's handwriting. "Family dinner, Saturday at 6, don't be late." That was all, no happy birthday. No heart, no smiley face, nothing. Still, I smiled. Because after everything we'd been through, I wanted to believe maybe, just maybe, this was his way of trying. My father wasn't affectionate. Never had been. He believed compliments made people weak. He believed hugs spoiled children. He believed emotions belonged behind closed doors. Growing up, I watched him shake Ethan's hand after baseball games. I watched him proudly introduce Ethan as my son. Whenever people asked about me, he usually answered, "That's Sophia." Not my daughter, just Sophia. It used to sting. Eventually, I convinced myself that was enough. After all, love doesn't always look the same. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I lived in Seattle. I owned a small interior design company, nothing glamorous, but I built it from scratch. No loans from family. No investors, no inheritance, just 12 years of 80-hour work weeks. Late nights, coffee, stress, and clients who sometimes forgot to pay. Still, I loved my life. I loved creating homes where families could feel safe. Maybe because mine never did. My apartment overlooked Elliott Bay. Every morning, I'd watch ferries cross the water. It reminded me life kept moving, no matter who stayed behind. That Friday morning, my assistant Lily walked into my office carrying a tiny chocolate cupcake. One candle, pink frosting. She placed it on my desk. "Tomorrow's your birthday," she grinned. I laughed. "You remembered." "Everyone forgot," I hesitated. "My family is celebrating tomorrow." She tilted her head. "You don't sound excited." "I am." The lie tasted bitter. Lily had worked beside me for 6 years. She knew me better than most relatives. She leaned against the doorframe. "Sophia." "Yeah, if you ever have to convince yourself you're happy." She smiled gently. "You're probably not." I laughed louder than necessary, changed the subject, talked about wallpaper samples, kitchen renovations, anything except family, because talking about family always felt like pressing on a bruise. Saturday arrived with bright sunshine. Seattle looked almost magical. I spent nearly an hour choosing a dress. Simple, elegant, blue, my mother's favorite color, my real mother. She died when I was 11. Cancer, fast, cruel. I still remembered the way she brushed my hair before school, the smell of vanilla lotion on her hands, the way she'd whisper, "You have the strongest heart, Sophie." Sometimes, I'd still hear her voice, especially on difficult days. Dad remarried only 18 months later. Carol entered our lives carrying expensive perfume, designer handbags, and opinions about everything, especially me. She never screamed. She didn't have to. Some people know how to wound quietly. Those cuts last longer. I stopped by a bakery. Bought my father's favorite pecan pie, not because he asked, because he loved it. Maybe, if today went well, we could finally become the family I'd spent 35 years dreaming about. Looking back now, that pie feels almost funny. I arrived carrying dessert, while everyone else had already arrived carrying secrets. Dad's house hadn't changed. Same white porch, same oak tree. Same wind chimes my mother bought 30 years ago. Hearing them made my chest tighten. I rang the bell. Carol answered. "Oh," that was her greeting. "Oh," then she forced a smile. "You're here. I hope I'm not late." "No," she stepped aside. "We've been waiting." Something about her voice made my stomach tighten. Inside, everyone was already seated. Dad, Ethan, Ethan's wife Melissa, their teenage son, and a man I'd never met before. Gray suit, leather briefcase, silver hair. He looked more comfortable than I did. Dad stood, not to hug me, just enough to gesture toward the empty chair. "Sit." I smiled anyway. "Happy to see you too." No one laughed, not even Ethan. Silence settled over the room like heavy fog. I placed the pie on the counter. "I brought dessert." Carol glanced at it. "We already ordered one." "Oh, I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to." I forced another smile. "It's okay." She simply looked away. Dinner began. Steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, everything cooked perfectly, everything tasted like cardboard. Conversation barely existed. Ethan talked about golf. Carol discussed a charity event. Dad nodded occasionally. Nobody asked about my business. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody mentioned my birthday, not once. Halfway through dinner, Ethan raised his glass. I smiled. Finally, maybe now, to family. Everyone lifted their glasses. I reached for mine. Then Ethan continued. "The people who truly belong." Everyone drank. Except me, because suddenly, I wasn't sure those words included me. An hour later, plates disappeared. Coffee arrived. The man in the gray suit finally opened his briefcase. Dad folded his hands. His expression became strangely calm. "Businesslike, Sophia," he said quietly. "I asked you here because something has to be settled." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the man beside him. "My attorney." "Attorney? Why was there an attorney at my birthday dinner?" The lawyer removed a thick envelope, placed it gently on the table. Every person except me seemed to know exactly what was happening. My heartbeat began pounding inside my ears. "Dad, what is this?" He looked directly into my eyes. No anger, no sadness, nothing, just cold certainty. Then he spoke. "Sophia, I've made my decision." And with that, my entire world began to crack. The room fell silent, not the comfortable kind of silence, the kind that squeezes your chest until even breathing feels too loud. I looked from my father to the attorney, hoping someone would smile and say this was all a misunderstanding. No one did. The attorney slid the thick envelope across the polished dining table. It stopped inches from my hand. I didn't touch it. "Dad," I whispered. "What's going on?" He folded his hands together as calmly as if we were discussing the weather. "I've spent a long time thinking about this." My heart started racing. "And I've decided it's time to make things official." Carol lowered her eyes, pretending not to watch me. Ethan leaned back in his chair with the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. That tiny smile hit me harder than anything my father had said. He knew. They all knew. I was the only person who had walked into this house believing it was a birthday dinner. The attorney cleared his throat. Miss Reynolds, your father has asked me to witness today's family declaration. Family declaration? I'd never heard those words before. What declaration? I asked. Dad looked directly at me. His blue eyes used to remind me of mine. Now they felt like staring into ice. Sophia, he paused. You're no longer part of this family. The words echoed inside my head. No longer part, no longer family. I waited for someone to laugh, for Ethan to say it was some terrible joke, for Carol to tell my father he'd gone too far. Nothing. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. I felt my throat tighten. What are you talking about? Dad didn't blink. I've rewritten my estate plan. I don't care about your money. This isn't about money. Then what is it? He exhaled slowly. You've made your own life. I thought that's what you wanted. It is. Then why are you punishing me for it? His jaw tightened. I've decided Ethan will carry on this family. The words landed like stones. And me, he answered without hesitation. You've chosen another path. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I started my own business because nobody in this family ever offered to help me. You never asked. I laughed, not because anything was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I was going to cry. I was 22. I had 2 part-time jobs. Slept on an air mattress. I ate instant noodles for months. I didn't ask because every time I needed you, I swallowed hard. You were already busy helping Ethan. The room stayed quiet. Ethan finally shrugged. That's not Dad's fault. I turned toward him. Remember when my apartment flooded? He looked away. You borrowed Dad's truck that weekend. I asked if you could help me move my furniture. You said you had golf. He shifted in his chair. That was years ago. I remember. Because people don't forget who shows up, or who doesn't. Carol reached for her coffee. Sophia, dragging up old memories won't change today. I stared at her. You've wanted this since the day you married my father. She smiled politely. I simply support his decisions. Support? She'd spent 23 years whispering into his ear, suggesting, influencing, reshaping every family tradition until there wasn't much left of the one I remembered. Dad tapped the table. Enough. The attorney opened the envelope. Inside were several neatly typed pages. I'll summarize, he said. Mr. Thomas Reynolds has formally removed Sophia Reynolds from all future inheritance, property interests, and family trusts. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. The family home will transfer entirely to Ethan Reynolds. The lake cabin to Ethan Reynolds. The investment accounts to Ethan Reynolds. The antique collection to Ethan Reynolds. It kept going. I barely heard the rest. Not because I wanted any of it, because every sentence sounded like, you never mattered. When the attorney finished, he placed the papers back into the envelope. Dad looked at me. Do you understand? I nodded slowly. I understand. You do. I understand that this dinner was never about my birthday. No one answered. I understand that you invited me here so I'd have an audience while you erased me. Still nothing. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I think I'll go. Dad didn't stop me, not even a little. I reached for my purse. As I walked toward the front door, I glanced at the pecan pie still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter. His favorite. I almost laughed again. I had spent all morning choosing the perfect dessert, while he'd spent weeks planning the perfect goodbye. My hand rested on the doorknob. Then I heard the attorney speak. Mr. Reynolds. I froze. Before Miss Reynolds leaves. There's still the second envelope. Second envelope. Every head turned toward him. Even Ethan looked confused. Dad frowned. What second envelope? The one your late wife instructed me to keep sealed. The room changed. Carol's confident smile disappeared. Dad's face lost all color for the first time that evening. He looked nervous, very nervous. The attorney reached back into his leather briefcase. Slowly, carefully, he removed a smaller envelope. Its paper had yellowed with age. Across the front, written in elegant blue ink, were 7 words that made my knees weak. For my daughter, Sophia, when she needs the truth. The attorney rested his hand on it. I believe, he said quietly, that moment has finally arrived. No one reached for the envelope, not me, not my father, not even the attorney. For a few long seconds, the only sound in the room was the ticking clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. I couldn't take my eyes off my mother's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in almost 24 years. The looping S in my name, the little curl at the end of every word, it was hers, without question. My father slowly stood. What is this? His voice sounded different, smaller. The attorney looked at him with calm professionalism. You know exactly what it is. I've never seen that envelope. You weren't supposed to. Carol's head snapped toward my father. What is he talking about? Dad ignored her. When my wife was dying, the attorney continued, she updated several legal documents. Most of them were carried out immediately. He rested his hand gently on the envelope. But this one came with very specific instructions. My pulse pounded. What instructions? He looked at me. She instructed me never to release this letter unless one of two things happened. What were they? The first. He glanced at my father. If Thomas Reynolds ever attempted to remove you from the family. Silence, the color drained from Dad's face. And the second, if you ever asked why she believed you would need to be stronger than everyone else. I felt my knees weaken. She knew, somehow. My mother knew this day might come. Carol finally broke the silence. This is ridiculous. The attorney didn't even look at her. The instructions were signed, witnessed, and notarized. Dad, Ethan said quietly, did you know about this? No, but the answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. I had known my father my entire life. He had one habit whenever he wasn't telling the whole truth. He rubbed his wedding ring, and there he was, doing it again. The attorney carefully broke the old wax seal. The paper crackled as he unfolded it. The scent of old stationery drifted into the room. My heart ached. It smelled like the cedar chest my mother used to keep in her bedroom. He looked at me. Would you like to read it yourself? My hands shook so badly I couldn't. My voice broke. I don't think I can, he nodded. Then I'll read it. He adjusted his glasses, his voice softened. My sweetest Sophia, tears filled my eyes before he reached the second sentence. If you're hearing this letter, then life unfolded exactly the way I feared. I covered my mouth. No, Mom. First, know this. I have loved you every single day of your life. If anyone ever tries to convince you that you were unwanted, they are lying. A tear rolled down my cheek, then another. The attorney continued. You were the greatest joy I have ever known. Across the table, Ethan stared down at his hands. Even he looked uncomfortable now. Sophia. There are truths I couldn't tell you while I was alive. Not because I didn't trust you, because I was trying to protect you. Dad suddenly interrupted. That's enough. The attorney looked up. No, I'm instructing you to stop. You have no authority over this letter anymore. Carol stood. This is upsetting everyone. The attorney calmly replied, it appears the letter is doing exactly what your late wife intended. Dad slammed his palm onto the table. I said stop. The sharp sound echoed through the dining room. For just a second, I wasn't 35 years old anymore. I was 11, standing in this same house. Listening to my parents argue behind closed doors, my mother crying, Dad shouting. A memory I'd buried for years suddenly came rushing back. Back then, I hadn't understood the words. Now, they came back perfectly. You can't erase her because she's inconvenient, my mother's voice. She deserves the truth, Dad shouting back. She'll never know if you keep your mouth shut, I gasped. The memory hit me like a wave. The attorney looked at me with concern. Miss Reynolds, I remember. Everyone turned toward me. I remember them fighting. Dad's expression froze. I was 11. I heard Mom screaming. I heard her say, my voice trembled. She deserves the truth. No one moved, no one breathed. The attorney slowly nodded. I suspected you might remember one day. Carol stared at my father. What truth? Dad remained silent. What truth, Thomas? Still nothing. The attorney looked back at the letter. I believe your mother answers that herself. He continued reading. If Thomas has disowned you, then I can no longer allow my promise to silence me. Everything he built after I was gone was built on a lie. A chill ran through my body. What lie? The attorney turned the page. His eyebrows lifted slightly, almost as if he hadn't expected the next line either. He looked directly at me. Read aloud. Sophia, you were never the child he believed you were. The room exploded. What does that mean? Ethan shouted. Carol looked completely confused. I couldn't breathe. The attorney raised one hand. Please, he continued. Before you panic, read every word. Your father loved you once, but someone convinced him of something that was never true. Dad whispered, no. The attorney kept reading. I have placed the evidence somewhere no one thought to look. If this letter reaches you, go to the lake cabin, your father's old workshop. Under the loose floorboard beneath the woodworking bench, you'll find a small metal box. Inside, he paused, his eyes widened. What? I whispered. What does it say? The attorney looked at me. Inside is the proof that changes everything. The room fell silent again. My father slowly sank back into his chair. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes, not anger, not disappointment, fear, and somehow. I knew my mother had planned this moment decades ago. She hadn't left me money. She hadn't left me jewelry. She had left me something far more dangerous. The truth. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I picked up my purse, walked out the front door, and closed it behind me. No one followed. The cool Seattle evening air hit my face, but it didn't calm the storm inside me. I sat behind the wheel of my car, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was 11 years old. I cried, not the quiet tears I'd learned to hide. I sobbed, the kind that steals your breath, the kind that leaves your chest aching, for my mother, for the little girl who spent years wondering why her father loved her differently, for the woman who had spent her entire adult life trying to earn affection that was never freely given. After several minutes, my phone buzzed. Lily. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Sophia. The moment I heard her voice, I couldn't speak. Hey, what's wrong? Another sob escaped before I could stop it. Oh my gosh, she whispered. Where are you? I'm sitting outside my dad's house. What happened? I looked at the front door one last time. My father disowned me. Silence. I know that sounds impossible. No, Lily said softly. It sounds like your worst fear finally came true. I laughed through my tears. You always know what to say. No, she replied. I just know you. I told her everything. The attorney, the inheritance, the letter, the hidden box beneath the floor of the lake cabin. When I finished, she asked only one question. What are you going to do? I wiped my face. I'm going to find that box. The Reynolds family lake cabin sat nearly 2 hours outside Seattle. It wasn't fancy. It had been built by my grandfather almost 50 years earlier. As a little girl, it had been my favorite place in the world. Mom used to bake cinnamon rolls every Saturday morning. Dad taught Ethan how to fish. He taught me how to sand wood in his workshop. I smiled through fresh tears. He always said, a smooth finish comes from patience. Funny, patience was the one thing our family had run out of. I pulled into the gravel driveway just after 10 that night. The cabin stood exactly as I remembered. Small, quiet, wrapped in towering pine trees. The porch light flickered in the wind. For a moment, I simply stood there. Every memory came rushing back. Mom laughing as flour covered her nose, Grandpa carving toy boats, me chasing butterflies while Ethan skipped rocks across the lake. Back then, we'd been a family, or at least, I'd believed we were. The front door creaked open. The familiar scent of cedar and old pine filled the air. Nothing had changed. Even the old rocking chair still sat beside the fireplace. I smiled. Hi, Mom. The words slipped out before I realized I'd spoken them. Somehow, being here made me feel close to her again. The workshop was behind the cabin, a small wooden building with dusty windows. I pushed open the door. Moonlight spilled across old tools hanging neatly on the wall. Grandpa had believed every tool deserved a home. So did Mom. So had I. Maybe that's why being told I was no longer family hurt so much. I'd spent my life trying to build homes for other people, while losing my own. The woodworking bench stood exactly where I'd remembered. Covered in dust, the attorney's words echoed in my mind. Under the loose floorboard beneath the woodworking bench, I knelt on the old wooden floor, ran my fingers across the planks. 1, 2, 3. The fourth board shifted slightly beneath my hand. My heart started pounding. I grabbed an old screwdriver from the workbench. Carefully, I lifted the board. Dust floated into the air. Beneath it was exactly what Mom had described. A small metal box, dark green, barely larger than a shoebox. I reached for it. It was surprisingly heavy. A tiny brass lock secured the front, but taped underneath was a single silver key. My mother had thought of everything, hands trembling. I unlocked the box. The hinges squeaked. Inside, there wasn't money, there wasn't jewelry, there wasn't a diary. Instead, there were 3 things: a thick stack of photographs, a sealed manila envelope, and an old cassette recorder. I frowned. A cassette recorder. Who still used those? I picked up the photographs first. The top picture showed my mother smiling, young, healthy, beautiful, standing beside a man I'd never seen before. He had dark hair, kind eyes, one arm around my mother's shoulders. On the back, written in her handwriting, were 6 words. Summer before everything changed. I turned to the next photograph, the same man holding a newborn baby. I froze. The baby wore a tiny pink blanket. On the blanket, stitched in careful blue thread, was one name. Sophia. A chill raced down my spine. No, I whispered. That can't be. The photograph slipped from my fingers onto the floor just then. Headlights swept across the workshop windows. A car. Someone had driven up to the cabin. At this hour, my pulse skyrocketed. Doors slammed outside. Then footsteps. More than one person. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Gravel under heavy shoes. Someone was coming, and judging by how quickly they were moving, they already knew exactly where I was. My heart slammed against my ribs. Crunch, crunch, Crunch. The footsteps grew louder. Who knew I was here? I quickly gathered the photographs and slipped them back into the metal box. The sealed envelope and cassette recorder followed. I switched off the workshop light. Darkness swallowed the room. The only light came through the dusty window as a pair of headlights washed across the old workbench. A truck door slammed. Then another. Voices. She's here. My blood ran cold. It was Ethan. I'd recognize my brother's voice anywhere. A second voice answered. We need that box before she opens everything. Carol. I pressed my back against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. How did they know? Had they followed me? The workshop door rattled, locked again, harder this time. Bang. Sophia, Ethan shouted. I know you're in there. I stayed silent. Open the door. Another loud bang shook the frame. Carol's voice came next, softer, almost sweet. Sophia, honey, we just want to talk. I nearly laughed. She had never called me honey in 23 years, not once. Now she suddenly cared, not a chance. My eyes searched the workshop. There was an old back door, half hidden behind shelves stacked with lumber. Grandpa had built it as an emergency exit years ago. Please, please don't be stuck. I eased the latch upward. It groaned. I froze. Outside, Ethan stopped pounding. Did you hear that? Carol whispered something I couldn't make out. I held my breath. After a long second, the pounding started again. I slipped through the narrow doorway into the cold night. Pine trees stood like dark giants around me. I crouched low and hurried toward the tree line. Behind me, crash. The front workshop door gave way. They were inside. Flashlights swept across the room. She's gone, Ethan yelled. Find her. My pulse exploded. I ran. Branches slapped against my arms. Twigs snapped beneath my shoes. The metal box felt heavier with every step. I reached my car, threw the box into the passenger seat, and locked the doors just as Ethan burst out of the woods. Sophia. He sprinted toward me. I started the engine. The tires spit gravel as I backed away. He pounded on my window. Sophia, stop! I looked straight ahead and drove. By the time I reached Seattle, it was nearly 1 a.m. I didn't go home. Something told me that if Ethan had followed me once, he could do it again. Instead, I drove straight to my office. Only Lily knew the security code. I locked the front door behind me and carried the metal box upstairs. 10 minutes later, Lily rushed through the entrance wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. The moment she saw my face, she hugged me. No questions, no speeches, just a hug. It was the first real hug I'd received all day, maybe all year. They followed me, I whispered. She stepped back. Who? My brother and Carol. What? They tried to take this. I pointed to the box. Lily stared at it. So, this is the truth. I think so. She pulled 2 mugs from the office kitchen. Coffee. Strong. Exactly what we needed. We sat at the conference table. The box rested between us. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Lily nodded. Let's see what your mom wanted you to know. I picked up the sealed manila envelope. Across the front, my mother's handwriting appeared once again, only open after finding the photographs. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was another letter. This one was much shorter. Sophia, if you're reading this, you've already seen the photographs. The man holding you isn't a stranger. His name is Daniel Brooks. He was the first man I ever loved, and he is your biological father. The room went completely still. Lily slowly lowered her coffee cup. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. No, that wasn't possible. Thomas Reynolds, the man who had just disowned me, wasn't my father. My hands trembled so violently the letter almost slipped away. There was more. Thomas knew the truth before we married. He chose to raise you as his own. For many years, he kept that promise. A tear landed on the page. But after I became sick, someone convinced him that Daniel had tried to come back into our lives. It wasn't true. That lie poisoned his heart. Over time, Thomas stopped seeing you as the little girl he promised to protect. Instead, he saw the reminder of a life he believed had betrayed him. I covered my mouth, everything, every cold birthday, every forgotten graduation, every distant hug, every disappointed look. It suddenly made sense, not because I'd done something wrong, because he'd slowly convinced himself I wasn't really his daughter anymore. Lily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry. I stared at the photographs. The man in them smiled exactly the way I smiled. The same eyes, the same crooked grin, the same dimple in the left cheek. How had I never noticed? Then something else caught my attention. The cassette recorder. A small piece of masking tape had been attached to it. In faded handwriting were 4 words. Listen to this first. I looked at Lily. She nodded. I pressed the play button. The tape hissed. Static filled the room. Then, a woman's voice, soft, gentle, my mother's voice. Hi, Sophie. Fresh tears rolled down my face. If you're hearing this, then I'm no longer there to tell you how proud I am of you. I closed my eyes for a moment. It felt as if she were sitting right beside me. I hope you never have to hear this recording. But if you do, it means the people I loved most have finally let fear become stronger than love. I squeezed Lily's hand, then my mother's voice changed, more serious. There is one final truth, the tape crackled. One truth I couldn't write down. Suddenly, the office lights went out. Everything went black. The recorder stopped. A loud click echoed through the building. Someone had cut the power, then. 3 slow knocks echoed from the office's glass front door. Knock, 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 Lily whispered, Sophia? I turned toward the dark lobby. A shadow stood perfectly still on the other side of the glass, watching us. Knock, 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 the sound echoed through the dark office. Neither Lily nor I moved. The only light came from the city outside, filtering through the windows in pale blue streaks. The figure behind the glass door didn't move, just stood there. Watching, my phone buzzed. The sudden vibration nearly made me jump. Unknown number, I answered without thinking. Hello, a calm male voice spoke. Don't open the door, I froze. Who is this? I don't have much time. Who are you? The man ignored the question. If the person outside gets that box. Your mother's last wish dies tonight. The call ended. I stared at the screen, no caller ID, nothing. Lily whispered, who was that? I don't know. The shadow outside finally stepped forward. The office lights flickered back on. The figure raised both hands. I don't want to scare you, he called through the glass. My name is Michael Carter. He looked to be in his early 60s. Gray hair, dark jacket, kind eyes, but tired, very tired. He wasn't Ethan. He wasn't anyone I'd ever seen before. He reached slowly into his coat. My heart jumped instead of a weapon. He held up an old leather wallet. Inside was a gold investigator's badge. I'm retired Seattle police. He slid an envelope against the bottom of the glass door. I worked with your mother. My breath caught. Lily looked at me. Don't trust him. I wasn't planning to. The man nodded almost as if he'd heard her. That's smart. You shouldn't trust anyone tonight. Then he turned around, walked back to his car, and drove away. He never once asked to come inside. 10 minutes later, after checking every security camera feed we had, Lily unlocked the door. The envelope was still lying on the floor. No name, no return address. Inside, one photograph. It showed my mother standing beside the same retired officer. They looked much younger. On the back was another handwritten note. Michael helped me when no one else would. Tucked behind the photograph was a business card. Michael Carter, private investigator, a phone number, nothing else. Lily folded her arms. What do you think? I looked at the photograph again. Mom trusted him. Just before sunrise, my phone rang again, this time. It was Ethan. I let it ring again and again. Finally, he left a voicemail. His voice sounded nothing like the confident man from dinner. Sophia, long pause, I know you're angry. Another pause, but Dad collapsed after you left. I stopped breathing. He had chest pains. They took him to Harborview. The message ended. Lily looked at me. What happened? I handed her the phone. She listened quietly, then sighed. Do you believe him? I don't know. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part remembered every childhood fever Dad had stayed awake through. Every scraped knee he'd bandaged before everything changed. People aren't always one thing. Sometimes they're both, loving and deeply broken. 2 hours later, I walked into Harborview Medical Center. The smell of disinfectant hit me immediately. Hospitals always reminded me of Mom. I hated that smell. A nurse directed me toward the cardiac floor. Outside room 418, Carol stood with folded arms. The moment she saw me, her expression hardened. What are you doing here? I came to see him. You've done enough. I laughed quietly. I've done enough. You upset him. I upset him. She stepped closer. If you just accepted his decision. I interrupted her. He disowned me. You forced him into that position. No, I met her eyes. You did, for the first time. Her confidence cracked, only for a second, but I saw it behind us. Ethan stepped out of Dad's room. He looked exhausted. Sophia, his voice was softer than before. Dad wants to see you. Carol immediately protested. Thomas needs rest. He asked for Sophia. She fell silent. I walked past both of them. Dad looked older than he had just 12 hours earlier. Machines beeped steadily beside his bed. His face seemed pale. He looked at me. I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't, he nodded. I deserve that. The room fell quiet. Finally, he spoke. Did you read your mother's letter? Yes, his eyes closed. I hoped you never would. Why? He stared at the ceiling. Because it means I failed her. I waited. He swallowed hard. I wasn't always the father you remember. I know. I loved you. The words caught me off guard. I loved you from the day your mother placed you in my arms. A tear rolled down his cheek. You weren't mine by blood, but you became mine by choice. I stood perfectly still. So why? His voice broke. I believed a lie. What lie? He turned his head toward me. Carol. Before he could finish, the hospital room door swung open. Carol rushed inside. Thomas. She forced a bright smile. The doctor needs you to rest. Dad's face changed instantly. The fear returned. He looked at me desperately. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, Don't. He coughed. Don't let her destroy what's left. Carol spun toward me. I think you should leave. I looked from her to my father. Something wasn't right. He hadn't been protecting himself all these years. He'd been afraid of someone else. As I stepped into the hallway, Ethan caught my arm. Sophia. He looked around to make sure Carol wasn't nearby. Then he slipped something into my hand, a tiny brass key. I found this in Dad's desk last night. I frowned. What is it? I don't know. He leaned closer. But whatever it opens. Carol has been looking for it for years. He walked away before I could ask another question. I opened my hand. Attached to the key was a faded paper tag. Written in my mother's handwriting were 4 simple words: Safety Deposit Box 214. I stood in the hospital hallway, staring at the tiny brass key in my palm. Safety Deposit Box 214, my mother's handwriting. The same graceful letters that had guided me to the metal box beneath the workshop floor. My heart raced. If she'd hidden something in a bank, it wasn't an accident. She had planned every step, every clue, every discovery, as if she knew that one day I'd have to rebuild the truth piece by piece. Lily met me in the hospital lobby 20 minutes later. She looked at the key. Ready? I took a deep breath. I don't think I'll ever be ready, she smiled gently. Good, I looked at her. The people who think they're ready usually miss what's right in front of them. For the first time in 2 days, I smiled, a real one, small but real. The tag attached to the key listed the bank's name, Rainier National Bank. The branch sat downtown in one of Seattle's oldest buildings, marble floors, tall columns, polished brass doors. The kind of place where secrets seemed to belong. A gray-haired manager greeted us politely. May I help you? I placed the key on his desk. I believe my mother had a safety deposit box here. He examined the tag. May I have your name? Sophia Reynolds. His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. One moment, please. He disappeared into a back office. Lily leaned closer. He recognized your name. I noticed. 5 minutes later, the manager returned with an older woman wearing a navy suit. She extended her hand. I'm Evelyn Harper, branch manager. She smiled warmly. We've been expecting you. I blinked. Expecting me? She nodded. Not today specifically, but eventually. What do you mean? She motioned for us to follow. As we walked toward the vault, she spoke quietly. Your mother rented box 214 24 years ago. She prepaid the fees for 30 years. Stopped walking. 30 years? Yes. And she left very clear instructions. What instructions? If anyone other than Sophia Reynolds requested access. The answer was no. We reached the massive steel vault door. Evelyn unlocked it. Inside were hundreds of small metal boxes lining the walls. She stopped in front of one, 214. She inserted her master key, then stepped back. The second key is yours. My hands trembled. I slid the brass key into the lock, turned it. The drawer slid out. It was surprisingly heavy. We carried it into a private viewing room. Inside wasn't just paperwork. There was a neatly organized file, a velvet jewelry pouch, a small wooden keepsake box, and a sealed video disc. Across the disc was a handwritten note. Watch this alone. Lily looked at me. I can step outside. I shook my head. No, if Mom trusted you enough to help me. I trust you too. I opened the file first. The first page made my stomach drop. DNA test, RESULTS. I stared at the bold letters. The report confirmed what the photographs had suggested. Daniel Brooks, 99.99% probability of biological father. Thomas Reynolds, excluded. I closed my eyes, even though I'd begun to accept it. Seeing it in black and white made it real. Lily squeezed my shoulder. How are you holding up? I don't know. And it was the truth. I didn't know who I was grieving anymore, the father I'd lost. Or the father I'd never known. Inside the velvet pouch was my mother's wedding ring. I gasped. Dad had always claimed it was lost during one of their moves. It wasn't lost. She'd hidden it. Beneath the ring lay a folded note. This belongs to you now. Nothing more, just those 5 words. Finally, I picked up the video disc. There was an old DVD player in the room. Evelyn quietly brought it in without asking questions. Then she closed the door behind her. The screen flickered. Static. Then My mother appeared. She looked thinner than I remembered, her hair covered by a soft scarf, but her smile was exactly the same. "Hi, Sophie." Fresh tears filled my eyes. "If you're watching this, then you've grown into the woman I always believed you'd become." She laughed softly. "I wish I could see you. I bet you're still making that face whenever you're trying not to cry, despite everything." I smiled. She knew me, even now. "I don't have much time." Her breathing sounded labored. "So I'm going to tell you the truth." She paused. "The biggest mistake I ever made was believing silence could protect the people I loved." She looked straight into the camera. "I should have told you sooner. I should have told Thomas sooner. I should have told everyone." She wiped away a tear. "When I met your father, I was already pregnant." Lily quietly lowered her eyes. "Daniel never knew. He had accepted a job overseas. There was an accident before I could tell him. I believed he had died." Several tears rolled down my face. "So I buried that chapter of my life. Then Thomas came along. He knew everything. He chose us. He chose you." For a moment, I remembered the man who taught me to ride a bicycle, who tucked me into bed, who carried me on his shoulders at the county fair. Maybe those memories had been real after all. Then Mom's expression darkened. Years later, someone sent Thomas anonymous letters. They claimed Daniel was alive. They claimed I'd lied. They claimed I'd planned to leave. None of it was true." She took a shaky breath. "I discovered who wrote those letters." The room went completely silent. I leaned closer to the screen. My mother's voice became barely a whisper. "It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't even Thomas." She looked directly into the camera. "It was Carol." Lily gasped. My heart stopped. "Carol wanted everything Thomas owned. She wanted Ethan to inherit it all. So she slowly poisoned him against you. Against me. Against our family." I confronted her. She smiled and told me no one would ever believe a dying woman. My hands began shaking uncontrollably. Mom continued. "I kept proof. It's hidden." The image suddenly glitched. The audio crackled. The screen froze. "No," I whispered. The picture returned for just 1 second, long enough for my mother to say 3 final words. Behind the black screen, the video ended. I stared at the blank television. "No, no, no, no." It had cut off. Right before she revealed where the proof was hidden, Lily checked the disc. "It looks damaged." I buried my face in my hands. We were so close. Just then, someone knocked gently on the viewing room door. Evelyn stepped inside. "I'm sorry to interrupt." "What is it?" She looked uneasy. "A gentleman is waiting in the lobby. He says his name is—" She glanced down at the visitor log. "Daniel Brooks." Everything inside me stopped. The name echoed through the room. The name I'd only learned 2 days ago, my biological father, according to the receptionist. He'd been asking one question. "Is my daughter finally ready to meet me?" For a moment, I couldn't move. It felt as though the air had disappeared from the room. Lily slowly reached for my hand. "You don't have to do this." I stared at the closed door. "I don't even know what this is." The name echoed through my mind. Daniel Brooks, a man I'd never met. A man I'd believed was a stranger until yesterday. A man my mother had loved. A man who, according to her letter, never knew I existed. I took one deep breath, then another. Finally, I nodded. "I'll meet him." The bank lobby was nearly empty. Near the tall front window stood a man in his early 60s. Salt and pepper hair, a navy sport coat, weathered hands. The moment he saw me, he stood. Neither of us spoke. We simply looked at each other. Then he smiled, not a broad smile, a trembling one, the kind that comes after years of hopping. "You have her eyes," he whispered. My throat tightened. "You knew my mother." A small laugh escaped him. "I loved your mother." He quickly corrected himself. "I still do in my own way." He didn't try to hug me. He didn't call me daughter. He kept a respectful distance. "I wasn't sure you'd want to meet me." "I wasn't sure either." He nodded. "That's fair." We sat in a quiet cafe across the street from the bank. For several minutes, neither of us touched our coffee. Finally, Daniel reached into his worn leather briefcase. "I've carried these for 24 years. He placed a bundle of unopened letters on the table. Every envelope was addressed in the same handwriting. Emily Reynolds, my mother's name. Each envelope had been returned with a red stamp. "Return to sender." I wrote to her every month after I came back. I thought she'd moved. I never knew. His voice cracked. I never knew she had passed away. I picked up one of the letters. It had never been opened, not one. "You didn't know about me." He slowly shook his head. "If I'd known." He stopped, fighting tears. "I would have crossed any ocean." I believed him, not because he said the right words, because he never tried to make excuses. "I was working in New Zealand when the accident happened," he explained. "I lost my passport, my contacts, everything. When I finally made it home almost a year later, Emily was gone. And Thomas, he told me she wanted no contact. My stomach turned. He lied. I don't know. Daniel looked out the cafe window. I've spent years wondering whether he believed he was protecting his family or protecting himself. I told him about the letters, about the photographs, about my mother's recording, about Carol. His expression darkened. I remember Carol. You do. She worked briefly with Thomas before they married. He leaned back. She asked me strange questions. What kind of questions? About Emily. About money. About whether I planned to return. He looked directly at me. At the time, I thought she was just curious. Now, neither of us believed that. As we prepared to leave, Daniel hesitated. There's one more thing. He reached into his wallet. Folded inside was an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local businessman SURVIVES mountain crash." The article was dated 25 years earlier. Daniel pointed to it. That accident. The one your mother believed killed me. It wasn't me. I frowned. What? My wallet was stolen 2 days before the crash. The driver had my identification. The police thought the victim was me. Everything suddenly made sense. Mom had mourned a man who was never dead. Daniel had searched for a woman who thought he was gone forever, and somewhere in between, someone had turned heartbreak into manipulation. My phone rang. It was Ethan. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. His voice was panicked. Sophia, what happened? Dad's gone. What? He checked himself out of the hospital. Why would he do that? I don't know. Then Ethan said something that made my blood run cold. Carol's missing too. Before I could respond, another call came through. Unknown number. I switched over. A familiar voice whispered. It was my father. Sophia, he sounded exhausted. If you still believe there's any good left in me, meet me at the old ferry terminal. Come alone. The line went dead. An hour later, I pulled into the deserted waterfront parking lot. Rain had begun to fall. The old ferry terminal had been abandoned for years. Broken windows, rusted railings. The sound of waves crashing beneath the dock. Dad stood alone near the edge of the pier. His shoulders looked smaller than I had ever seen them. Older, he turned as I approached. I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't, he nodded. I deserve that. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he reached inside his coat. Slowly, very slowly, he pulled out a thick folder. I've spent 24 years believing the wrong person. His voice broke. I owe you the truth. Before he could hand me the folder, a black SUV roared into the parking lot. Its tires screamed across the wet pavement. The driver's door flew open. Carol stepped out. She wasn't alone. 2 men climbed out behind her. Neither looked interested in talking. One of them pointed directly at the folder in my father's hand. Carol's face twisted with anger. Thomas, she shouted over the rain, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Dad stepped in front of me, for the first time in decades. He protected me. You'll have to go through me. The larger man reached inside his jacket. I couldn't tell if he was reaching for a weapon or something else, but one thing was certain. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about the truth, and someone was willing to do almost anything to keep it buried. Rain hammered the old ferry terminal. The wind whipped across the water, carrying the smell of salt and wet wood. Dad stood in front of me. His shoulders were squared. For the first time in years, he wasn't hiding behind silence. He was standing between me and danger. Carol took a slow step forward. Thomas, she called, her voice calm, don't make this harder than it has to be. Dad didn't move. It's over, Carol, she laughed, a cold, bitter laugh. No, it only ends when that folder is destroyed. The taller of the 2 men reached toward Dad. Dad held the folder tighter. You'll never touch it. One of the dock security guards, hearing the shouting, appeared from the nearby office. Hey, what's going on over there? The 2 men exchanged a quick glance. Without another word, they turned and hurried back toward the SUV. Carol looked at Dad with pure frustration. You've just thrown away everything. She climbed into the vehicle. Within seconds, it disappeared into the rain. The parking lot fell silent again. Dad's knees buckled. I rushed forward and caught him before he hit the ground. Easy. I'm okay, he whispered. No, I said, you're not. We drove straight to the Seattle Police Department, not because we trusted everyone, because Dad said there was finally enough evidence to tell the truth. The retired investigator, Michael Carter, was already waiting. When he saw Dad walk in, he let out a long breath. I've been waiting a long time for this. Dad looked at him. So have I. We gathered in a small interview room. Michael placed a digital recorder on the table. For the record, today's statement is voluntary. Dad nodded. It is. He looked at me. His eyes were full of regret. Then he began. 23 years ago, Carol showed me anonymous letters. They claimed Emily had been seeing Daniel behind my back. They claimed Sophia wasn't really mine. I confronted Emily. She denied everything. I believed her. He stopped, his hands shook. But after Emily died, the letters kept coming. They were more detailed. They included photographs. I frowned. The same photographs from the metal box, he nodded slowly. Except mine had Daniel cut out. I stared at him. What? Michael opened the folder Dad had protected. Inside were copies of the altered photographs. The edges were uneven. Someone had literally cut Daniel out of every picture before mailing them. I thought, Dad whispered. I thought Emily had hidden part of her life from me. He looked down. Instead of asking questions, I let resentment answer them. His voice cracked. And every year after that, I loved you a little less. The words hurt, but they were honest. More honest than anything he'd said in decades. I watched you succeed. I watched you build your own business. And instead of being proud, I convinced myself you didn't need me. A tear slid down his cheek. The truth is, I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd failed your mother. Ashamed that I'd failed you. Michael slid another file across the table. We traced the anonymous letters years ago. I looked at him. You knew. I suspected. But I couldn't prove it. He opened the file. Inside were copies of old envelopes. The handwriting looked familiar, very familiar. Lily, who had joined us after work, leaned closer. Sophia, I swallowed hard. I know that handwriting. It wasn't Carol's, it belonged to someone else, someone I'd known my entire life. Ethan. The room went still. Dad looked up sharply. No, Michael nodded. I'm afraid so. Ethan mailed the letters. Dad pushed his chair back. That's impossible. He was a teenager. Michael sighed. He wasn't acting alone. He mailed them because Carol told him they were birthday cards for relatives. Had closed his eyes. He never knew. Not at first. Michael nodded. But as he grew older, he learned exactly what they were. The room felt colder. Dad whispered, my own son. Just then there was a knock on the interview room door. An officer stepped inside. We've located Carol. Everyone looked up. She was trying to board a flight out of Seattle. And Ethan, the officer hesitated. He came with her. I couldn't believe it after everything. He had chosen her, not the truth. Not our family, her. Later that evening, I walked outside the station. The rain had finally stopped. Seattle's skyline reflected across the wet streets. Dad joined me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he handed me a single sheet of paper. It wasn't legal paperwork. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a will. It was handwritten. I started writing this in the hospital, he said. I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage to give it to you. I unfolded it. The first line blurred through my tears. My dear Sophia, the greatest mistake of my life wasn't believing a lie. It was choosing that lie over my daughter. He looked at me. I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't earned it. I folded the letter carefully. No, he lowered his eyes. I haven't. But I took a slow breath. Today is the first day you've told me the truth. For the first time in years, he smiled, not because everything was fixed, because healing had finally begun. Then my phone buzzed, a text message. Unknown number. It contained only one photograph, a photograph of my mother's grave. Fresh flowers rested beside it. Beneath the picture were 6 chilling words. This story isn't over yet, Sophia. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. This story isn't over yet, Sophia. A cold breeze swept across the sidewalk outside the police station. Dad looked at me. What is it? I handed him the phone. He read the message once, then again. For the first time since we'd begun uncovering the truth, I didn't see fear in his eyes. I saw determination. We're done hiding, he said quietly. And if someone isn't finished with this story, then we'll finish it the right way. 3 days later, the police investigation moved quickly. The altered photographs, anonymous letters, and financial records painted a clear picture. Carol had spent years manipulating nearly everyone around her. She had quietly redirected family finances, isolated my father from old friends, and encouraged distrust whenever anyone questioned her decisions. The investigators also confirmed something Ethan had admitted during questioning. As a teenager, he'd mailed envelopes for Carol because she told him they were routine family correspondence. Years later, when he realized what they really were, he stayed silent out of fear and shame. His silence had helped keep the lie alive. It didn't erase his responsibility, but it explained how the deception had lasted so long. A week later, I visited my mother's grave. For the first time in years, I didn't come with questions. I came with flowers, white lilies, her favorite. I knelt beside the headstone. Hi, Mom. The morning sun filtered through the trees. I found your letters. I found your voice. And I finally found the truth. A tear rolled down my cheek, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt freeing. I spent so many years trying to earn love. I thought if I worked harder, became kinder, became more successful, someone would finally choose me. I smiled softly. You already did. You chose me the day I was born. The breeze stirred the lilies for just a moment. It felt like she was there. Someone cleared his throat behind me. I turned. Daniel stood several feet away, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. I hope I'm not interrupting. I shook my head. No. He walked over slowly and placed the flowers beside mine. I used to bring these to the hiking trail where your mom and I first met. He laughed quietly. She always said wildflowers were more beautiful because nobody told them where they were supposed to grow. I smiled through fresh tears. That sounds like her. He looked at the headstone for a long moment. I missed 24 years. He swallowed hard. I can't get those years back. No, I don't expect you to call me Dad. Wouldn't even ask. I appreciated that. He wasn't trying to replace anyone. He was simply trying to be honest. I'd like to get to know you, he smiled. Whenever you're ready. For the first time, the future didn't feel frightening. It felt possible. A month later, my office was busier than ever. Clients filled the conference room. Design boards covered the walls. Lily walked in carrying a cupcake. One candle, pink frosting. I laughed. You remembered. She rolled her eyes. Of course I did. Several employees stepped out from the hallway. Then more. They'd secretly planned a birthday celebration. The room filled with applause. Someone started singing. I couldn't help laughing, real laughter, the kind that comes from feeling safe. Lily handed me a small gift box. Inside was a silver keychain. Engraved on it were 5 simple words. Home is where love lives. I closed my eyes for a second. All those years, I'd believed home was a house, a family name, an inheritance. I had been wrong. Home was the people who stayed, the people who told the truth, the people who chose you. That evening, Dad called. His voice sounded stronger. I wanted to ask you something. What is it? I've started family counseling. I smiled. That's good. I know I can't undo the past. No, I also know forgiveness can't be demanded. It can't. He was quiet for a moment. But, would you have dinner with me sometime? I looked out the window toward Elliott Bay. The ferries crossed the water just as they had every morning before all of this began. Life had kept moving, so had I'd like that. His voice trembled. Thank you. 6 months later, we gathered at the lake cabin. Not because of a funeral, not because of a legal meeting, just because we wanted to. Dad stood beside the old workshop. He handed me a small wooden box. I made this. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, Mom, Dad, me, and Ethan. Taken years before everything fell apart. On the back, Dad had written, families aren't destroyed by one mistake. They're destroyed when the truth is buried. Thank you for helping me uncover ours. I looked at him. You know. What? You once told me I wasn't family anymore. He lowered his head. I know. I stepped closer. You were wrong. He looked up, confused. Family isn't something you erase with 6 words. It's something you fight to rebuild. Tears filled his eyes, without thinking. He hugged me, not the awkward, distant hugs from my childhood. A real one. The kind I'd waited 35 years to receive. As the sun began to set over the lake, I looked toward the old workshop where my journey had truly begun. One loose floorboard, one hidden box, one mother's courage to leave the truth behind. That truth hadn't given me everything I wanted. It had given me something far more valuable, myself. My name is Sophia Reynolds. This happened to me. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The people who try hardest to convince you that you don't belong are often the ones most afraid of the truth, because the truth has a way of waiting, patiently, quietly, until the day someone finally has the courage to open the second envelope. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me about the door that opened for you. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.